G'day guys, Rod here, Fish Tech Solutions. Just going to have a quick chat about braids today. Sort of the main topic here is knowing your braid, knowing which braid to use when. So the two braids that I'm highlighting today is two of the toray products. One is the Sea Bass PE Power Game, and the other one is the super strong PE Naga F4. So you can see the number down there, F4. And you can see an 8 braid up in the top over there. So these two braids are completely different products. They're both PE braids. They're both soft and supple, but they have certain characteristics which make them better suited to different uses. So we'll start off with the Sea Bass PE. I've taken one out of the packet. The Sea Bass PE Power Game is a very fine diameter braid for breaking strain. It's an 8 ply braid, 8 weave, which means it's a very tight weave. You can't really see it in the camera over there, but it is a really fine diameter braid, weaved exceptionally tight. Now that's great because it casts exceptionally well. It gets your lures down. It's a braid of choice for a lot of the bass anglers on the tournament tour, where they fish in deep plastics, or they fish in jerkbaits and they're trying to get those jerkbaits a little bit deeper, or they're making big long casts with deep diving crankbaits and cranking them down to depth at dams like Somerset, Wivenhoe, where they're trying to get those crankbaits down to that 20-foot plus depth and cranking it through. So fine diameter. But because it's a fine diameter, it doesn't like abrasion. It's a trade-off. You sort of can't really have both when it comes to braided lines. So the Sea Bass PE, I'll use that in a saltwater environment when, for example, I'm using small plastics or hard bodies in open water. But once I get in amongst trees or weed beds or rock bars, that's when I'll sort of try and steer away from this line and go more across to the F4. But it'll still handle the little knocks, but it's no different to a monofilament or a fluorocarbon line. The thinner you go for breaking strain, the less that's going to handle abrasion and knocks. So the Sea Bass Power Game, very fine diameter. So to put it in perspective, the 12-pound braid in the Sea Bass is a similar diameter to 6-pound and 8-pound braids in competitive market braids. So it's a very fine diameter, exceptionally long casts, get lures down well, but abrasion resistance is a little bit limited. The Naga F4, so that second packet, the yellow packet, comes in a 200-meter spool, and it's an F4, so it's a 4-ply. So it's actually, I'd go as far as saying it's a coarse braid, so quite a coarse weave. Again, you can't really see, but you can actually see over there. You can see the weave through the braid. Now, what makes this braid so good is because it has this coarse nature. It's a fairly standard diameter breaking strain. It compares fairly well with the other competitive braids on the market with regard to diameter and breaking strain. But what makes it really good is if you fish this around weed beds or trees, it's got really good abrasion resistance. Now you would sort of think, well, hang on, if there's 8 weaves in the Sea Bass and only 4 in this one, you'd think there'd be the potential for it to have better abrasion resistance. But it's the coarseness of this braid that makes it so good. So for example, if I'm fishing around weed beds, I will definitely choose this as my first choice. Because when I hook a fish, a barra or a bass, and it buries me in the weed with a lure, I'll just keep tension on the rod, just keep the tension on the fish. And as that fish goes through the weed, this braid will actually physically slice through the weed. It'll actually, cut the top of the weed off, and you'll be able to get your fish off. Whereas the Power Game in that 8 weave, it will bury in the weed and it won't be able to saw through it. Where the F4, great for fishing around weed beds, trees, rock bars, got exceptionally good abrasion resistance, so it's a good all-round braid, and it can handle shock. The super strong braids have got a degree of monofilament pigment through them, so they've got a little bit of give, so they can handle a bit of shock. But yeah, so that's the main key differences. The The sea bass power game, very fine diameter braid, 8-ply, beautiful casting, soft, supple, and the F4, Naga F4, good abrasion resistance, great around weed beds and timber. That's the two braids there.